Winter Sentinel. In the heart of a desolate forest, where the trees stood naked and skeletal against the biting winds, a forgotten scarecrow stood in a snow-covered clearing. Unlike most scarecrows, this one wasn't placed to ward off crows in a field. It stood alone in the forest, as if guarding something unseen. The scarecrow's head was a burlap sack, stitched with a jagged, toothy smile and black button eyes that seemed to follow anyone who dared come near. Its tattered clothing fluttered in the icy breeze, but it never moved, not even when the wind howled ferociously. The local villagers whispered about it in hushed tones, calling it the Winter Sentinel. They said it had been cursed to guard the forest long ago, and those who trespassed during the winter months never returned. One evening, a young man named Peter decided to test the legend. Armed with a lantern and a knife, he ventured into the forest, determined to prove the scarecrow was just an old wives' tale. Snow crunched beneath his boots as he approached the clearing. The scarecrow loomed ahead, its twisted grin barely visible in the dim light. As Peter stepped closer, a strange unease settled over him. The forest felt eerily silent. No wind, no rustling branches, no distant calls of animals. Just his breath, visible in puffs against the frigid air. He shone his lantern on the scarecrow, laughing nervously. "You're just straw and sticks," he muttered, reaching out to touch it. The moment his fingers brushed the burlap, the lantern flickered and went out. Darkness engulfed the clearing. The grin on the scarecrow's face seemed to stretch wider, its button eyes glinting faintly. Peter stumbled back, clutching his knife. The air grew colder, and he felt something move behind him. Whipping around, he saw shadows shifting among the trees, shadows with no sources gliding closer. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice trembling. The scarecrow's grin seemed to echo in his mind, a whispering laugh that grew louder and louder. The shadows encircled him, their forms taking shape, twisted figures with hollow eyes and mouths that gaped endlessly. Peter ran, but the snow seemed to drag at his feet, the clearing stretching impossibly far. The laughter followed him, sharp and mocking. The next morning, villagers found Peter's lantern lying in the clearing. His footprints ended abruptly in front of the scarecrow, which now wore a new addition, a scarf made of tattered cloth that hadn't been there before. The villagers never spoke of Peter again, and they avoided the forest entirely after that. Yet, some claimed that on cold winter nights, they could hear faint laughter carried on the wind, and the scarecrow's grin seemed sharper, as though it were waiting for its next visitor.